Hi, I'm Mira. Welcome to another story. Let's see where this one takes us. The towering obelisk loomed over the desolate plaza of Aridus Colony, its jet-black surface shimmering faintly under the dim light of the planet's distant sun. Alien vines pulsed with soft, eerie bioluminescence, casting shifting patterns across the cracked ground. Dr. Amira Saeed's boots crunched softly as she approached the obelisk, her breath hitching. She was drawn to it, not just by its imposing presence, but by the intricate markings spiralling up its surface, shifting like liquid thought. "This isn't just art," Amira murmured, running a gloved hand over the smooth surface. The markings shifted beneath her touch, faintly glowing symbols rearranging themselves in mesmerizing patterns. "Don't get too close," Lieutenant Riker Voss barked. He stood a few paces behind her, his plasma rifle gripped tightly in both hands. His gaze swept across the plaza, scanning the darkened alleyways and looming ruins for signs of danger. Something's off about this place. Amira rolled her eyes but kept her focus on the obelisk. "Of course something's off, Lieutenant. This colony vanished without a trace. That's why we're here." Riker frowned, his grizzled features set in a grim expression. "Doesn't mean we have to make the same mistake. Whatever happened here, it wasn't friendly." Amira tuned him out, leaning closer to the obelisk. She traced a sequence of repeating symbols with her finger, her mind racing. This wasn't random. The patterns were deliberate, the repetition purposeful. Language, she was certain of it. "It's a message," she said, more to herself than to Riker. "If I can just..." The obelisk shuddered beneath her, emitting a low hum that reverberated through the plaza. Amira stumbled back, her heart racing. The symbols lit up in brilliant white, shifting faster than her eyes could follow. The vines surrounding the obelisk twitched, their glow intensifying. "Amira," Riker said sharply, raising his rifle. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she shot back, though her voice wavered. The obelisk's hum grew louder, a rhythmic vibration that resonated in her chest. She stared at it, entranced, as the symbols slowed and reformed into a single massive glyph. "Leave." The word hung in the air, projected as a three-dimensional hologram above the obelisk. Amira felt her blood run cold. She had never seen this language before, but the meaning was unmistakable. Riker stepped forward, his rifle aimed at the obelisk. "I don't like this. We need to go." "No," Amira said, her voice firmer than she felt. She turned to him, her expression resolute. "This is why we're here, Riker, to find out what happened. This obelisk isn't just a monument. It's a record, maybe even a control system. If we leave now, we'll never know the truth." Riker's jaw tightened. The truth won't matter if we're dead. Before Amira could respond, a low growl rumbled from the shadows of a nearby alley. Both of them froze. Riker swung his rifle toward the sound, his body tense. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the faint scrape of claws on stone. "Saeed," Riker said in a low voice, not taking his eyes off the darkness. "Whatever answers you're looking for, you'd better find them fast." Amira's mind raced. She glanced at the obelisk, then back at the shadows, where a hulking figure began to emerge. The creature was massive, its body a grotesque fusion of sinewy flesh and obsidian-like plates. It moved with an unsettling fluidity, its elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp claws that clicked against the ground. Its eyeless head swiveled toward them, as though sensing their presence. Amira's breath caught in her throat. The obelisk pulsed faintly, its glow synchronized with the creature's movements. "It's connected to the obelisk," she whispered. "The symbols, the vines, that thing. It's all part of the same system." "Fantastic," Riker muttered, stepping in front of her. "Now stay behind me." The creature growled again, a guttural sound that sent shivers down Amira's spine. It took a step forward and the obelisk flared brighter, its markings shifting once more. "Wait," Amira said, grabbing Riker's arm. "It's reacting to us. It knows we're here." "No kidding," Riker said dryly, his eyes narrowing as the creature crouched, preparing to lunge. "I'm giving it 3 seconds before I start shooting." "Don't," Amira pleaded, her mind racing. "If it's part of the system, shooting it could trigger something worse." Riker's grip on his rifle tightened. Worse than being torn apart? Hard to imagine. The creature let out a piercing cry and charged. Riker fired a burst of plasma bolts, the shots illuminating the plaza in rapid flashes. The creature recoiled. black ichor spraying from its chest, but it didn't fall. Instead, it reared back and emitted a deafening screech. The vines around the obelisk shuddered violently, their luminescence flaring. Amira turned back to the obelisk, desperation clawing at her. The symbols were shifting faster now, forming patterns that felt almost intentional. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. If it's a system, she muttered, then there has to be a way to override it. Riker glanced at her, his expression a mix of frustration and fear. You'd better figure it out fast. Amira reached for the obelisk, her fingers brushing its surface. The hum intensified, and the symbols slowed, aligning into a new message. Balance must be restored. Her eyes widened. It's not just a warning, she whispered. It's a question. It's asking us to choose. Amira's fingers trembled as the glowing glyphs reformed before her eyes, repeating the phrase, balance must be restored. The obelisk seemed to hum with expectancy, the air around it thick with tension. Behind her, Riker's plasma rifle crackled as he fired another burst at the creature, which screeched and retreated momentarily before stalking forward again undeterred. Amira! Riker barked. His voice was taut, his tone bordering on panic. Whatever balance it's asking for, you'd better figure it out now! This thing isn't gonna stop! Amira's mind raced. The obelisk wasn't just a warning system, it was an active, decision-driven entity. Everything here, the alien vines, the creature, the shifting symbols, was interconnected, part of a vast network that operated on its own rules. And those rules required equilibrium. What if it doesn't want us to fight? Amira said, her voice rising above the din. She turned to Riker, her chest heaving. What if we're the ones causing the imbalance? Riker fired another shot, his jaw clenched. What am I supposed to do? Invite it to tea? Amira knelt by the obelisk, her hands hovering over its glowing surface. She tried to think like a linguist, not a panicked explorer. Symbols aligned and repeated in patterns that felt familiar, cyclical, logical. Balance wasn't just a demand, it was a concept this system valued above all else. What had disrupted it? Their presence? Their aggression? The obelisk's hum intensified and the glyphs shifted again. Amira stared at the new message, her heart sinking. Sacrifice stabilizes the system. Her breath caught. Sacrifice, she whispered. The word felt heavy, final. What? Riker snapped, glancing back at her. The creature lunged, and he barely dodged, its claws slicing through the air where he'd stood moments before. What does it mean? Amira stood slowly, her face pale. It's saying the system needs a life to restore balance. Riker froze, his rifle still trained on the creature. You're joking. It's not a threat, it's a protocol, Amira continued, her voice shaking. The colony wasn't abandoned, it was assimilated into this system. They tried to resist it, and this is what happened. Riker's gaze darted between her and the creature. So what? It's telling us to just roll over and die? That's your big solution? Amira took a deep breath. No, it's asking us to make a choice. Sacrifice doesn't have to mean death, not if we can figure out what it wants. The creature roared, charging again. Riker fired a precise shot, hitting it squarely in the chest. This time, the creature stumbled, its movement sluggish. The vines around the plaza lashed out violently, glowing brighter with each passing second. We're out of time, Riker growled. Either you make this thing stand down, or I'm taking it out with the biggest blast I've got. Amira's eyes locked on the obelisk. No, she said firmly. That's not balance. That's destruction. If we destroy it, we'll trigger the same collapse that took the colony. And if we don't, that thing will kill us. Riker shouted, gesturing to the creature. What's the alternative, Amira? What are you seeing? Amira focused on the obelisk, the symbols shifting faster now. Then she saw it. A sequence of glyphs forming what looked like an offering. The image of the colony's energy grid flashed across the obelisk's surface, its network glowing faintly. It was as though the obelisk wanted to draw power, life force, to stabilize itself. I can redirect it, she said suddenly, the realization striking her. The system isn't asking for a death, it's asking for energy, something to feed the balance. Riker shook his head, his frustration evident. And how do you plan to do that? Amira reached for her pack, pulling out a portable battery array. If I can patch this into the obelisk's energy nodes, it might accept it as a substitute. Riker glanced at the snarling creature, then back at her. And if it doesn't? Amira met his gaze, her expression resolute. Then we'll know it wasn't about balance, it was about control. Without waiting for his response, she knelt by the obelisk, her fingers deftly connecting the array to the shimmering surface. The moment the cables touched, the obelisk flared with light, its hum deepening to a thunderous vibration. Amira's heart pounded as she worked, watching the energy feed into the structure. The creature froze mid-step, its claws poised to strike. The vines around the plaza shuddered, then retracted slightly, their glow dimming. Amira held her breath as the glyphs shifted one final time.
Ah! Balance achieved!
The creature let out a final guttural cry before collapsing into a heap, its body disintegrating into black motes that swirled toward the obelisk. The vines retreated fully, the air around the plaza stilling. The obelisk's glow softened, its markings settling into a steady rhythmic pulse. Amira collapsed back onto the ground, her chest heaving. Riker rushed to her side, his rifle lowered, his face a mix of relief and frustration. "You took a hell of a gamble," he said. Helping her to her feet, Amira gave him a faint smile. "I think it paid off." Riker glanced at the obelisk, its hum now a soft background noise. And what happens if it decides it wants more balance? Amira looked at the obelisk, her expression pensive. Then we'll have to learn its language better. And hope it doesn't learn ours first. The air in the plaza was still, yet charged with an uneasy calm. The obelisk's glow had softened to a faint, rhythmic pulse, and the writhing vines had withdrawn into the crevices of the ruins. Amira and Riker stood in its shadow, catching their breaths, their faces bathed in the dim bioluminescence of the alien structures. "Balance achieved," Amira murmured, repeating the obelisk's final message. She looked at the device in her hand, the battery array now drained and lifeless. For a moment, hope stirred in her chest. They had stopped the system's escalation. The colony's remnants were at peace again, at least for now. Riker adjusted his rifle, still keeping a wary eye on the obelisk. "So, what now? We walk away and pretend none of this happened?" Amira shook her head, her expression resolute. "We've barely scratched the surface of what this place is. The obelisk isn't just a warning system, it's part of a larger network, a living ecosystem that the colony became a part of. Whatever balance it needed, we gave it a temporary fix, but we still don't understand the full system." Riker exhaled sharply. "We almost died to give it that fix, and you want to stay here longer?" Amira stepped toward the obelisk, her eyes scanning its intricate surface. The symbols had settled into a pattern of elegant repetition, like a resting heartbeat. The obelisk reacted to us because we disrupted its balance. It didn't lash out for no reason. It was trying to protect its system, its world. Riker crossed his arms. And what happens when that system decides it needs more than a few batteries? What happens when it starts taking people again? Amira turned to him, her face pale but determined. "That's why we have to understand it. The colony wasn't destroyed by some external force. It was assimilated because they didn't know how to communicate with this. We can learn from their mistakes." Riker gestured toward the obelisk. "And if we don't? If we poke it the wrong way again?" Amira didn't answer immediately. She stared at the obelisk, her mind racing with possibilities. The system wasn't malevolent, but it was far from benign. It had its own logic, its own priorities. They had barely survived this encounter, and the cost had been high. Yet walking away without learning more felt like an even greater risk. "We'll proceed carefully," she said finally. "We record everything, study the symbols, understand the patterns. If this system is part of a network, then it might have protocols to communicate, to share its purpose. But we can't leave it unchecked. If we do, this could happen somewhere else." Riker gave her a long, measured look. His shoulders relaxed slightly, though his expression remained grim. "Fine," he said. "But if this thing so much as blinks wrong, I'm pulling you out of here." No arguments. Amira nodded, though her thoughts were already drifting. She retrieved a datapad from her pack and began scanning the obelisk's surface, documenting its current state. The patterns were stable, almost serene, but there was something deeper beneath the surface, a resonance she couldn't quite decipher. It was as though the obelisk was waiting. As the hours passed, the ruins grew quieter, the ambient hum of the obelisk fading into the background. Riker patrolled the perimeter, his movements precise and vigilant. Amira remained focused on the obelisk, her fingers flying over her datapad as she recorded the glyphs. The more she studied them, the more she saw a logic emerging, a rhythm that hinted at something greater. "It's a cycle," she muttered, mostly to herself. "The symbols repeat, but they evolve over time. They're adaptive." Riker approached, his brow furrowed. "Meaning what?" Amira looked up at him, her eyes wide with realization. "Meaning the system isn't just maintaining balance, it's learning. Every interaction, every disruption, it's adapting to compensate. That's why it responded so strongly to us. We introduced variables it wasn't prepared for." Riker frowned. "And what happens when it decides we're a variable it doesn't want?" Before Amira could answer, the obelisk emitted a soft pulse, its light rippling outward. The ground beneath their feet vibrated faintly, and the vines in the distance stirred, their glow returning. Amira's stomach tightened as new symbols began to form on the obelisk's surface. "Harmony requires observation." She stared at the message, her heart pounding. "It's aware of us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not just reacting, it's responding. It wants to know what we'll do next." Riker stepped back, his rifle raised again. "That doesn't sound like a system that's done with us." Amira swallowed hard, her mind racing. The obelisk had stabilized for now, but it was clear their presence had awakened something deeper. The system wasn't just maintaining balance, it was evolving, and they were now a part of that process. "We leave," she said finally, her voice steady. "But not forever. We regroup, we analyze the data, and we come back prepared. This isn't over, it's just the beginning." Riker nodded, his jaw tight. "Let's hope we're ready when it decides to take the next step." Amira glanced back at the obelisk one last time as they left the plaza, its faint pulse lighting the ruins like a heartbeat. Whatever secrets it held, she knew one thing for certain. The balance they had restored was fragile, and the system was watching, always watching. Thanks for listening. If the story stuck with you, come back next time for another journey.